Hey cats, it's your Midsole man, Eddbud here. I've got a new shoe review for you today. I finally managed to get hold of a pair of the Asics Superblast 2. You've had your biased reviews, you've had your unbiased reviews. Now you've got your Eddbud review. Let's get to it. Thanks for tuning in, people. It is always appreciated. Do hit that subscribe button, but also give this video a thumbs up like as well to help spread the word. Do drop us a comment too to help fight the algorithm. Danke schön. The Superblast 2 in hand. Here's the stats. In this UK 10.5 or US 11.5, I've got a slight increase in weight to 299 grams here, so it's 10.5 ounces on the money, a little bit heavier in hand. Now bear in mind my previous pair of the Superblast was a UK 11 for the V1, that was 284 grams, so even going a half size down here we've still got a bit of a weight increase. So anybody that tells you the weight is the same, well, they're just doing a Nigel Farage. Yeah, you'd think being a half size down, perhaps the weight would probably even out. Still about 15 grams heavier. Though it's not all bad. In the heel there we've got 2mm of additional foam, so it's about 47mm back in the heel in my size and about 40mm up front in the forefoot. So I'm getting around about a 7 to 8mm drop approximately. The Flight Foam Turbo Plus that we've got here does feel a little bit firmer than it did in the Metaspeed Sky Paris. In fact, I don't think this is the same foam. Either that or the paint layer on top of the foam is a really thick one and it's kind of messing with my readings, but in fairness, my foot is a pretty good measure and it doesn't feel anywhere near as sort of squashy and responsive, I suppose. Underneath that bigger section of foam, we've got Flight Foam Blast Plus Eco. So that's the Asics eco-friendly version of Flight Foam Blast Plus. Slightly denser squash in that one. I think we've got about 35 on the Shore A durometer scale. It's very similar to the foam that we found in the Nimbus 26 and the Keanu 31. 12.6 centimeters in the widest point up front and about 10 centimeters in the widest point in the heel. So it's a little bit of additional surface area width here in the Superblast 2. This is a pair that have been sent to me by Asics for review, but they're not paying me to make this video, and they're not going to be vetting my views before my valued viewers get to see them. Alright, we always start with the upper first, so that's what we're going to do. So there's a new engineered mesh here. Is it better than the V1? Well, in fairness, I actually really like the upper on the last version of the Superblast. It was really fast in terms of its drying capability. I wore it on a very wet summer's day last year, and it dried up very quickly. This is more like a sort of jumper style mesh. Does feel a little bit thicker to me, though it's still very flexible and very breathable as well. In the toe box you've got lots and lots of holes there to help your foot breathe on those hot runs. Now I did find over my initial runs that the upper does give a hell of a lot. I had to stop and retighten the shoes a few times. I was using heel lock lacing or runner's knot lacing, and I had some significant slip in the heel. Going up a hill, actually, I had to basically stop and just retighten the shoes. I had to experiment a little bit to get the lace pressure just right to get a good lockdown in this one. I think if you've got a wider foot, you're probably going to be okay with this upper. There's a reasonable amount of width here. Oh, a lot of people are saying this shoe perhaps is true to size. I've gone for a 10.5 here, and usually I'm an 11, and it's absolutely spot on. If I'd gone for an 11, I think that heel slip could have been even worse, so just letting you know. So super vented throughout the upper really. Even the tongue has got some little vents here in the sort of lower portion. You've got a pull tab here on the tongue and another one at the back. I never use these things. I just untie the shoes and tie them back up when I need them. Don't really feel that you need them all that much. There is a traditional heel counter back here in the rear of the shoe, and at least I'm not having to pull the different sides of the upper almost all the way in, like cinch them in a hell of a lot. The laces here are similar, they're stretchy to the V1. Do like the padding on the tongue, it's only in the places where it really needs to be. So is it a step forward there? Guess so. I didn't really have many problems with the upper aside from the laces in the V1. So V1 was a little bit on the long side. I kind of suggest you go a half size down if you can. I have to say though, this version of the shoe is perhaps one of the most amazing looking models this year. It's absolute poetry in motion, although it's not actually moving or anything. You know what I mean. Kind of looks a little bit like a cocktail. Maybe you could put a little umbrella in there, maybe a little cherry. The colorway is absolutely exceptional. So bit of heel slip. I'm not absolutely certain that the upper isn't still giving as I'm using it. Feels like it needs a bit of braking, I suppose. Not really better or worse than the V1 at all. I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3 after my initial runs for the upper. Midsole, midsole.
Midsole now.
So with the V1, I recall that needed quite a few miles to break in, and very similar here in the V2. If I'm going to be brutally honest, it didn't really feel all that stand out in my initial runs. Almost a little bit clunky, I suppose, and that additional stack there kind of makes you want to use it. If you're a forefoot runner, I don't really think you're going to get all that much out of this shoe. I tried landing forefoot, midfoot and heel, and it certainly feels better if you're actually landing sort of further back in the shoe. Just think you're going to get more out of it, and you're kind of paying for all this foam, and if you're never considering landing on it at all, then yeah, but it's your money, you know, if you want to do that, that's fine. Just feel that forefoot strikers aren't going to get as much out of it. Towards the end of my second run, I decided to really open up my stride and kind of land on my heel a little bit more. And actually the shoe felt a lot better then. As I mentioned earlier, the Flight Foam Turbo Plus midsole material here really doesn't feel like the same stuff that's on the Metaspeed Sky Paris. It's firmer, I mean, you could say responsive, I suppose. There's quite a bit of squash in the heel, but up front, it doesn't have that same bouncy rebound-like feel. The rigidity of the midsole is still here in the V2, though it felt much more at home at steady paces, which are for me around about 8 minutes to 7 minutes 30 per mile. I'm certainly going to rule out using this as some type of race shoe, aside from a marathon perhaps. The thought of using it for like a 10k or 5k simply does not appeal. That's not really what this shoe is designed for. It does feel a little bit more clunky to me over the version 1. That was perhaps just on the cusp of being useful for a half marathon, though this kind of feels a little bit more like a trainer now to me than the first version of the shoe. And some might be a bit surprised by the 195 quid price tag that you've got for a trainer. I think the changes are actually a bit more drastic in the midsole than you might realise. So it's a new top layer of foam, and don't forget the bottom layer is actually a little bit different to what you had in the V1. It's a bit denser, a little more rubbery. The side walls of that midsole do creep up quite a bit around the heel. I found it a stable enough ride, and perhaps if some of those other super shoes are just too squashy and unstable for you, then the Superblast 2 might be ideal. Just finding that this one isn't quite as versatile as the V1. Is that down to the extra weight, the extra stack height here in the midsole? Perhaps it's the foam or the combination of all three of those things. But so far it's not quite what I enjoyed about the version 1 of the Superblast. Though that shoe did take time to improve, so jury's a little bit out on that yet. I'll give it a 2.7 out of 3 for the midsole after my initial runs. Outsole is where we've got some significant improvements in the Superblast 2. Rejection of stones is much better. In the V1 you used to get a lot of stowaways here. They used to get clogged up and you used to have to liberate them. But much better rubber application here. You almost got lugs here, I suppose. The ridges here and the rubber on the Superblast 2 are much better, really improving the traction and the grip. Asics do suggest on their website that we've got 2 different types of rubber here. I'm not absolutely sure about that. I've measured all of them, or all the pieces at least, and they all seem to be coming in around about the same short A durometer reading. They reckon that there's Asics grip and some AHA Plus here, but I'm not sure which bit is which, and they all seem pretty similar. So your guess is as good as mine on that one. In wet weather, the depth of the rubber is much better here and provides some assured cornering and better toe off. Though there's still not a huge amount of rubber here directly on that area where you might be toeing off, so just be aware of that. That forefoot trampoline-like area is still here, though it feels a little bit muted, I suppose, when you compare it up against something like the Blast 4. There is a small area of exposed midsole here on the lateral side of the shoe. That's the only bit that's got direct contact with the ground, so I think we're going to have some reasonable durability and longevity out of the outsole here on the Superblast 2. Dirt and grit does build up in some of the ridges, but it's quickly gotten rid of with a sort of firm bristle brush. Maybe the additional rubber here on the outsole is part of the issue in terms of the weight increase. Maybe it's the lack of the cutouts into that Flight Foam Blast Plus material as well that's causing the shoe to be a little bit heavier. Either way, we do have some improvements here in the outsole. I'm going to give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the outsole after my initial runs. Talking value now, this is one seriously expensive shoe, and when you consider it's a trainer at 195 quid, I think you've got to be quite invested in like marathon training and those longer, slower runs, perhaps using this shoe as an impact protector to help you avoid injury as the mileage goes up. Now, many runners and viewers of the channel got hundreds of miles into their Superblast shoes. I think I see this one being used in the same way by the same folks. The rubber improvement here will no doubt increase the usability of this one. Though I don't think personally this is now the most versatile of shoes. I think the Superblast one was a little bit more versatile. It's got a wide surface area. The stack here is maybe preventing me from enjoying it quite as much as I would do if it was around about a 40mm stack. Does feel like quite a niche option now for like easy or recovery runs or the longer, slower efforts. Is it worth 195 quid? Well, that's a question only you can answer. Is it worth it to take up some significant parts of your shoe rotation? Maybe. One question I will pose to you though, is this shoe as good as the Blast 4? That just feels a little bit more versatile to me. I mean, it's still very cushioned, it's very forgiving, it's a little bit lighter. Maybe a heavier built runners will get a little bit more out of the Superblast 2 than the Blast. Though if you want significant impact protection and some stability, I think people will still opt for the Nimbus or the Kayano, and they're coming in a little bit cheaper. The shoe's certainly well put together out the box. The foam sections are nicely aligned. There's no glue seepage here. There's no dodgy stitching on the upper. Does feel like a good quality item. This shoe already seems to be sold out in a number of sizes, like completely on certain online retailers. Let's just hope they don't starve the market too much, because I think a lot of people want to get hold of these. The first version was really difficult to get hold of. When a new colorway dropped, they sold out in minutes. It's also a shoe that was never discounted or ever put on sale. I only ever saw it at its sort of proper retail price. Maybe that will be the same with the Superblast 2. So considering the price and the more niche nature of the shoe, I'm going to give it a 2.6 out of 3 for value after my initial runs. So if I've totaled the scores up correctly, we've got 10.9 out of 12 for the Superblast 2 after my initial runs. I will do a secondary review on this one once I've got a load more miles into it. I think it could be a little bit like the Superblast, where it just needs some time and some miles mashed into it. It's got to be pulverized a little bit to get the best out of it. Have you picked up this shoe? And what are your thoughts and opinions? Let us know down in the comments. Musical interlude time. Quite a lot of things going on, I guess, the last week or so. Loads and loads of things happening. Some things kind of tied up. There's some closure on some stuff, but it's certainly a difficult time mentally. And I'm not just talking about the general election. Either way, I've been listening to the fantastic Joy as an Act of Resistance by Idols. One of my favourite tracks on there is in fact called The Samaritans. Definitely seems to be a track which is all about men's mental health. Some of the words and phrases used there, probably things I've heard when I was younger, which really aren't all that helpful to young men growing up. You'll know the ones I mean. Being told that, you know, it's not masculine to cry and that you'd never see your dad cry or something. Very interesting track. Really makes you think about what people are being shaped to become or have been in the past. Really love this album, actually. The more and more you listen to it, the more it kind of gets out some of those negative feelings. I like music that kind of turns those negative feelings into positive things, gets you thinking about stuff, and actually you realise you're doing alright. Go and check it out, it might do the same for you. Joy as an Act of Resistance. by idols. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed today's review. Hope you're doing alright out there as well. Remember that your best is always good enough, and if anybody's telling you any different, then you know what to do. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. Drop us a comment to help fight the algorithm. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you